Hey, everybody, and welcome to another week of Crunching Your Growth with me, Phil Masiello. Tonight, we have a really interesting story. Um, Everybody talks about social enterprise and social startups, and I know it's a big topic, and we've had a couple of people on here on the show that have sort of that bent to it, that social side, but this is completely different. I mean, this is really, I think, an innovative way to do to build a social enterprise. It's called Dignity Coconuts, and it is a social enterprise, but its mission is to stop modern day slavery for the coconut farming community. And they can explain it a lot better, but I'll just give you the high level view. So the founders, there are two founders, Stephen Freed and then Erik Olson. Erik's the president, Stephen's the CEO and founder, and they'll talk about their backgrounds. But what's unique about this is I think sometimes when people hear social enterprise, or they hear that it's some gray area, it's a nonprofit or whatever, these guys have really taken an innovative approach in the fact that they're actually taking product to market and taking that profit and taking the sales and putting it back into it. So they're actually creating products. It's not just about raising capital or raising money and giving it away or any of that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. There's certainly a place for it, but I think this is much better because it's actually a business, but it's actually a thriving business. These guys have 114 employees, 156 farmer families. They're organic, USDA organic certified. The product's in 1,200 stores. So this is a thriving business, and I want to hear the story. I heard a little bit. I had a conversation with Erik and had some background in it. But I think hearing their story, the whys, the hows, certainly a timely business. And let's bring them in and we'll hear their story. Stephen, Erik, thanks for coming on and thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So why don't you take us back a little bit and explain the impetus of it all? Why did you decide to do this? What was really the driving, motivating factor of it? And what are you hoping to get out of it?
We were doing nonprofit work in this area of the Philippines for years. We had built an orphanage, built a high school, and even done a few micro enterprises. And still, this community was stuck in extreme poverty, and they were really hurting. And so we dug deeper to find out what's at the root. And one of the roots is that these coconut farmers were being exploited by the coconut industry itself. And so we decided our nonprofit model was not going to be enough to help these people out. And so we started a business where we buy their coconuts at a fair price, and we do holistic community development work with these communities, and we make the coconut products and sell them in the United States.
Yeah. And is it just the coconut farmers that are being exploited, or is that the one you pinpointed and said we can help this group out?
Yeah, we had a number of opportunities, not only in the Philippines, but other countries as well. And we just settled in on that one commodity of coconut and the product there. So it could have been a number of options. But early on, before we even began the company, one of our early founders, Don Biker, who was with Bain at the time, came and joined in, and we put our heads together. And he was the one who had been doing some nonprofit stuff in that area. We had been doing other work. He was doing it right in that area, and really just asked the people who live there, what do you have in your own hands that we could do here? And it was, a few things: rice, fish, coconut. And we decided that a global export market that was viable was coconut. Yeah. So that's how we got into it, and got into products from that. So
yeah. What drove you to the Philippines to begin with?
Well, I had worked in a lot of countries across the world, and our interest in the Philippines was partly because Don, the other gentleman, and I, that was the place where our life stories converged. We had been working, as Erik was saying, putting in an orphanage and some other things in the area. So it just was an option. We looked at Africa, we looked at Thailand, we looked at a number of places, but that was where his life story and mine came together. So we decided to go there.
What was your, I think, if you could go into your backgrounds a little bit as to how you got to the point where you decided to focus on nonprofit work, and then obviously nonprofit work ending up with a social enterprise.
Yeah, you and I, before we came on air, we were talking about New York, and I was a produce broker in New York, but I got into nonprofit work for quite a while, and we kind of entered into this. Erik came more out of a business background, and of course Don out of business in Boston. But we kind of came at it really looking at the size of the issue of the sex industry and trafficking and all that kind of deal. Nonprofit work was just not going to make a dent in that, and we were doing good work, really good work, but it was very, very limited in scope. I had one story where when we first went into the area, I arrived at the closest airport, good 4 or 5 hour drive from where we ended up. And arriving at the airport, I was trying to get a car to take me down to this area.
Right.
Nobody knew where it was. So at the airport, all the drivers are trying to get a ride. And I finally found one guy who knew where the place was I was trying to get. And we're riding down there, and it's getting more and more remote as we get closer to it. And he kind of looks at me and he says, are you a missionary? And I said, no, I'm a businessman. He said, good, because we need jobs, not more missionaries. And I'm not knocking the missionaries at all, but it was a business that was the possibility of really making a difference in the community. So that's kind of what was driving our motivation.
Yeah. So basically, so essentially you're turning it into basically skincare, essentially body care products.
Yeah, a lot of people use it for body care, but they also use it in the kitchen as a healthy cooking oil for cooking, baking, sauteing. So people use it for a lot of different things.
Are you selling it in bulk as well? Because we were in the skincare business. I had a beauty brand for a number of years, and I think we bought raw coconut oil in 50-gallon drums. We were using so much of it because it was such a, we were a raw product. Right. So we didn't, everything we had in it was supposedly edible, and but I mean, it's a huge market, I think, on the wholesale side, especially for high quality.
And we had planned when we started the business that we were going to make coconut oil how everybody else was making it, and we were going to sell it wholesale. We never wanted to build our own brand. We didn't think we had the marketing chops for that, and so that was the plan. But as we started talking to the big retailers and the private labels of the world, they kept asking us, okay, so tell us again how the story goes, because we're going to put it on the side of the jar. And there's something that just didn't feel right.
Yeah,
I didn't feel right that they were exploiting our story, that we had worked so hard to help these people, and they were going to slap it on their label as if they had done it themselves. And it didn't feel right. And we thought, what would it take to just try it? Why not try building our own brand? So we did a Kickstarter campaign, and the goal was to raise $100,000. And sure enough, we raised $110,000. That gave us enough money for the lids, the labels, the label makers, the filler, and a few other things. And we launched our own brand of Dignity Coconuts. We just changed our name to Dignity Made. And ever since then, 99% of our sales is in our own brand.
I think the other thing, Phil, was we were our whole motivation was to help these people, to do something, make a difference in one place. And by going to the retail product, we were able to get a lot more of the value chain down toward the people who live there. If you make it and ship it out and do all of your packaging and everything else outside of the area where you're actually producing it, you kind of pull some of that value away from the very people you're trying to help with the value of the product. So moving into retail was not what we intended at the beginning, but became what we did. So
yeah, and it's created a lot more jobs. We have people who are doing the filling, the labeling, and everything. And it also, I think it benefits the customer too. I think a lot of customers are wondering, who made my product? The whole iPhone girl phenomenon of, the person who got their brand new iPhone, and there was a photo of the worker who had made the phone. I mean, that went crazy because people want to know, where does this come from? Who made it? How are they treated? And so our customers, every customer orders a jar, they get to see, oh, this jar was made by Marilyn, and they can see her story and what her life is like. And I think for customers, that's a big deal. They feel that connection.
I 100% agree with you. We work with a lot of brands, and we try and explain, which is sometimes very difficult to get across to people, that the consumer today wants authenticity, number one. And number two, storytelling is how you connect with the customer. Especially this generation of anybody who's under 40 years old, in that generation, they're tired of just being fed an ad that says, buy my product. I'm, Procter and Gamble, or buy my, not that I want to bash Procter and Gamble, but I'm just saying, they want the story of who's doing it. They want to understand where it's coming from. They're more in tune to it, but they want to understand the story, and they want to understand the authenticity of it all. But where it gets tricky are the people who have sort of skirted the rules and the regulations and made up some stories, and then it gets a little tricky. But I think what you guys are doing is tremendous. And as a brand guy, I like Dignity Made better than Dignity Coconuts, because I think
it opens up a lot of doors.
It opens up a lot more opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm sure you can find other products there that you can do sort of the same thing. Again, I was just thinking back when we were in the skincare business, we got an oil from the Philippines. It was called Tamanu nut oil. And, we use that as a foundation. There's a whole study on the product for anti-aging, but it's a natural product. So anyway, it was always difficult to get. But there is one question I have, which I understand. You buy the product. I understand it creates jobs and all that. I'm not so sure I get the connection between how it affects human trafficking, or the sex trafficking. I'm not so sure I understand how you make that connection.
Yeah. So we, in a lot of our years of nonprofit work, we were helping women get out of sex trafficking, and they would be in these terrible situations. I mean, it would make you either so mad you'd want to punch through a wall, or just break down and cry. And we saw a few women get out, and it was really wonderful to see that their transformation. And it did take a lot of time and energy to help these women with their trauma therapy, help them gain their confidence back, and really get back on their feet. And through that time, really started saying, why were they there in the first place? We looked upstream to say, hey, how did they get here?
Right.
What led them to this situation they're in now, which is so terrible and evil? And for so many of them, they were in this desperate place of, they usually lived in rural areas, usually uneducated, no jobs, and they were often being exploited somehow, some sort of social injustice. And often they were in debt. And that kind of financial anxiety really clouded their judgment when somebody came to the family saying, hey, I can get your daughter a job as a waitress in Europe, or somewhere else, as a maid in somebody's home. And that was the start. That's when it would happen. They were so desperate that they would say, sure, even though they knew we shouldn't trust this person. And so we thought, if we could stop this at the source, we could see that this community in the Philippines was vulnerable, right, and at risk. And so if we can stop this before it's a problem, then that would be incredible. And we don't have to do the hundreds of hours of trauma therapy. There are some small stories. We've heard some stories of women getting trafficked. We heard, it's probably hundreds that we've heard, but we know that it's underreported. We know for every one that's reported, there's 100, if not more, that it's happening. But people are unwilling to say, yeah, that job I went to that everybody thought was going to be so great, I was actually raped or taken advantage of. That's hard to say to your husband or to family members.
Right.
I think there's real fundamentally, there's the issue of poverty, and it leads to desperate decisions and choices that are really difficult, painful ones that are made either by the family or the individual. But job creation and training, reigniting education, all of those things really work against trafficking. So the way you stop it is, like Erik was saying, at the source. And a robust company that's doing training and development in the community intentionally really goes a long way to stopping it before it happens, really.
Right. So let's get back to the business side of it. You're essentially buying the coconuts from the Philippines, bringing them into the United States, and then manufacturing here, or?
No, we have a plant. We have a large plant right there in a very poor area. When we went there, we decided to build in a place that didn't have a road, didn't have electricity, didn't have internet, nothing. And everybody said you can't do it, and that's a terrible place to do a business. There's no logistics, the basics of a business. But we said the reason that place is poor, the reason that place has no opportunity, is because no one has gone and forced a good business to happen in that place. So we built the building, put in the machinery, and we run the factory there. And soup to nuts, we ship a finished product from right there, those seaside villages. You think of nipa huts with the grass huts, and that's exactly where we live and work. And then we contract with the farmers in the area. As you said, we have 164 farms that we have contracts with, and these are small family farms. These are not a gigantic agribusiness. So we contract with them. We train and help them achieve organic certification. And then we bring those nuts and process them right there at the plant and ship out the jars when there's not a typhoon. But, so if you went there, Phil, you could stay at our guest house, because we'd love to have you drop in, and please drop in without notice. If the story's real, you'll be able to come when we're without a dog and pony show and see that it's really happening every day right there. So.
And how often are you guys there?
I used to go every 10 weeks or so. I commuted sort of to the Philippines and been there 40, 50 times. And now Erik's going to go all the time, and I'm going to stay home and watch football.
I'm actually going next week.
Oh, that's fantastic.
So yeah, but we're really engaged in the community. We do a very, very thorough, big community training and development program. So we're teaching about health and family life. We're teaching about. We brought in electricity. Now there's a concrete road, 50-mile road there into the area.
Wow.
And we brought in the internet. And so we've been teaching people how to run a computer, how to get on the internet. What is it? Open up the whole area. It was interesting when we put the road in. Well, we didn't. The governor did put the road in, but he put it in because there was finally business there, something to drive to. But the whole area changed dramatically, and that's a whole other story I won't get into. But I remember the first day I was standing out in that field, and a bus went by, and I was like, "That's a bus!" I just saw a city bus drive by, and the area was opening up, and people could get commerce and get out, get an education, etc. So, yeah.
It's amazing to make it happen, and I'm sure you're proud of the accomplishment. It sounds amazing to me. I was telling Erik on a call that we were on, we're involved with a company that works in the recycling world, and it's essentially social enterprise. And the fact that in Brazil, Colombia, Vietnam, several of these countries, they have a terrible problem with waste, right? And waste management, especially in Brazil. So if you're Johnson and Johnson or Kimberly Clark or any of these big companies, and you're selling product into Brazil, you have to buy back. Let's say that you put 10 cubic tons of plastic waste into Brazil. The government wants you to buy back 90% of that. But you're Johnson & Johnson, you don't have the capability to buy that waste back and handle the recycling. So we're involved with this company called iWork, where and the way that the recycling happens is there are essentially these areas where a town may have a building in it where everybody brings the trash, and then they sort it and essentially sell that out to the other recyclers. But like what you guys experience, they have no knowledge of how much that's worth or anything. So iWork comes in, basically trains the people that work in these small disparate recycling facilities, for lack of a better word, because it's actually a job. The people going out and picking the waste all around the country, it's actually a job. They can make money doing it. And so iWork goes in and teaches them how to do it safely, gloves, masks, things like that. And then how to handle the business. And then what we did was we set up a marketplace so that, let's say that, this facility has, 1 cubic ton of plastic, PET plastic waste. This one has, 1, and this one has 1, and Johnson & Johnson needs, 15 tons. They can go onto the platform, they can buy it. We bring it to a place that processes it and then sells it back to Johnson & Johnson, but we don't make any profit off that. All the profit goes back to all the folks. We just cover the costs of doing it. Well, iWork does. We're involved with it, but and we do it in Vietnam and Colombia and all these other places. So it's sort of similar in the fact that these folks need training. I mean, some of the things they were doing in the past, like they would eat off the conveyor belts when they're sorting this garbage, essentially, and you're trying to teach them that that's unhealthy, and we've set up this whole training piece where they use computers to learn and to train, and they become better, and they're actually making more money because now they're not getting ripped off by the guys who were buying the product from them and recycling it or reprocessing it and selling it back. So now we actually set the price of what recycled PET is, and that goes back to these disparate recycling centers. So anyway, it's sort of the same thing, but when you do it, there's obviously a sense of, I think, a sense of accomplishment, or a sense of, like you really feel like you made a change when you look at what these folks are doing. And then when you leave and they carry through the processes because they felt like they've learned something and now they're empowered, I think, it definitely had an impact on me.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for a bunch of years, but it's totally interesting. So where are we going from here? We're continuing to expand the market. We're continuing to expand the product lines, driving more into retailers. Is that what the plan is?
Yeah, we just launched our new branding, Dignity Made, and so we're now coming up with the website and the new packaging, and we also have some new products that are come down the pipeline. We've made our first one outside of coconut products was lip balms. We made a natural, no chemical and no bad stuff kind of lip balms. Also vegan. Figured out how to do that, and customers loved that and asked for other products. So we've been working on a soap. We've been working on. We found a lot of people that use our coconut oil when they do dry brushing. Phil, I can tell you probably dry brush. you know, good complexion. Yeah, so we started selling these dry brush beauty kits, and we've been getting raving reviews for those. And then we found a lot of women use coconut oil to take off their makeup at night. So we made these little eco makeup remover kits with bamboo cloth pads and our coconut oil, and that's been going well too. And yeah, so we have some new products we're looking at expanding into, and new retailers. But coconut oil is it's a mature category right now, so it is hard to break through, and it's so we're looking at places of how do we tell our story, how do we get on the shelf.
Yeah. I like the product focus, but it's got to be difficult to. I mean, if you're doing all the manufacturing in one place, like lip balms, for example, that's a whole different process than filling jars of coconut oil, right? I mean, you've got to have that equipment in there because I would assume you're hot filling, and then it cools down and becomes the balm, right?
Yeah, it's tricky. We really wrestle with how much do we innovate and how much do we outsource and have a co-packer do things. This first product we made, the virgin coconut oil, again, we were going to make it the way everybody else makes it, but we started looking at the equipment, and our engineers kind of scratched their head and said, wait, that's the best way to make it? And they started looking at olive oil, and the best olive oils use a different process. They use a centrifuge. Right. And they said, hey, let's try using a centrifuge on this coconut oil. And they did it, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And so we now have a uniquely better product than all of our other competitors. We have one or two that they have a pretty good coconut oil too, but ours is really better. It's raw. It's one of the only ones that's raw, and it tastes better, smells better, absorbs your skin better. So we have a unique product there. And the lip balms are quite unique as well. But when we think of growing and expanding, it's a big question. How much do we innovate and create a whole new product, which is a lot of time and energy?
Yeah.
How much do we say, hey, you know what, we can make this product, or this co-packer could make this product, and it would be a good quality product to offer our customers, and it won't take so much time and energy.
Yeah. Well, I like when you think about it in terms of marketing, and I always do, that you can be better, or you can be different, or you can be better and different, right? And that's sort of the home run. That's what everybody's trying to aspire to. And then you have so many people out there that they just have Me Too products. And those are the people that get stuck, right? You go into retail to try and sell your product. I have a pasta sauce. What's special about your pasta sauce? Well, nothing really, right? I mean, I think one of the best product launches of the last couple of years was Truff with their I don't know if you guys know them, but hot sauce. They made a hot sauce, which is a huge market, and they put truffle in it, and they made their bottle look like a truffle, and then they expanded into pasta sauce again, carrying through the truffle. They made a mayonnaise, using the truffle in the mayonnaise, but it was a huge success because it's different and it's better. Their product was better. And then the other one, when you speak about olive oil, was Graza, which really didn't do anything innovative when it comes to olive oil. It was all about understanding the customer that they were reaching, which is that 20 to 40-year-old who didn't want to get involved with, this is first pressed extra virgin. They came up with their product, and they have two bottles. One is for sizzle and one is for drizzle. So this is the olive oil you used to cook with. This is the olive oil you put on your salad. And that was their sort of innovation. And so, again, they're different, right? And so I think what you're doing, which is when you say, look, we take the virgin coconut oil and we brought it out with a centrifuge, which makes a better and different product, right? The lip balms are better and different. I think that says a lot, especially for, guys who are sort of doing it on their own and just sort of muddling through, right?
Yeah, it's nice also to have a product you really do believe is better.
Yeah.
When you go to a trade show and there's a whole bunch of coconut oils and people try them all and come and say, that actually is better. It's lighter, it's clearer. It hasn't been heated past 115 degrees. It doesn't have a roasty coconut overwhelming smell. All those things lead to you feeling like I can really sell this with vigor, because it is good. I don't have to fake it. So
yeah. Plus you have the story to back it up, which is, I think, even more important. I think the story is tremendous. And, and I think people will gravitate towards it, right? If you've heard about it, which is really the key, right, is to get that message out. But if customers hear about it and they've got a choice between coconut oil that's sitting on the shelf by somebody, could be somebody credible, could be somebody, big, or yours, 90% of the time they're going to choose yours because there's a story there. And so, which I think is important. And we do, you were talking about women using coconut oil to take their makeup off. Again, I go back, when we were in the skincare business, our partner in that business was a woman named Carol Alt. She was a model back in the 80s, and she had written books. The reason I got her involved in the company was she had written books about the raw lifestyle, and she swore by raw food. She says it cured a whole bunch of illnesses for her, and she was very credible in the space. And so when we had the idea to do this skincare, we got involved with her and she was actually the spokesperson, and we went on the shopping channels with it and all that. But that was her big thing, was every night she used to buy these gallons of raw coconut oil that we would get for her from, I forget what country we're getting it from, but she swore by it. She used it to take her makeup off. She used it as a moisturizer. She loved it. And it wound up being a foundation product for us, became part of the skincare that we were doing. We got involved in, skincare, cosmetics, and day creams, night creams, and all that, but everything was raw, not heated above 115 degrees. Actually, nothing was heated. Actually, we tried to stay even lower than that. We had a formulator who figured out, through using a centrifuge, I believe, how to get things to combine without heating them, right? So without creating a heated emulsification. And it was all in the way that they put it together. And that was what made us unique. I had nothing to do with the manufacturing. I had nothing to do with Carol formulated. I was just the marketing and, it was our business, but, but it's interesting.
Yeah. I will say, because many of your listeners are entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs, there was a cost to developing this product.
Oh, sure.
It was 2 years of research and development. And we didn't expect that when we started, because the manufacturers, they looked at it, they said, well, that's similar to dairy cream, the coconut cream, similar to dairy cream. And so, we'll stick it in one of these centrifuges, and out one side is going to be the coconut oil and the other side is going to be that skim milk. You'll be up in 3 months. Well, they could not figure it out. And they sent us the machine. They had their top engineers coming all the way from Europe to fly into our little manufacturing plant, kind of in the middle of the jungle. And they would leave saying, I don't know, we thought that this would work. The science says it should work, and they didn't figure it out.
Yeah.
And eventually it was one of our engineers with a high school degree.
6th grade. He a brilliant guy who hadn't had an opportunity. And now he's gotten his engineering license in the Philippines. And he was the guy who, not in one day, but just hard work, trial and error, scientific method he had learned about from the books he read, and said, okay, I'm going to do that. And over the course of a year and a half, he figured out how to exactly dial in that centrifuge to produce what we have. So kind of a cool story of, got a lot of those stories of people with great natural ability and no opportunity.
Yeah. Again, that's got to just be fulfilling when you can take somebody who has a natural ability and give them the opportunity, and all of a sudden they feel proud and
Yeah.
great.
Well, it's really the motivation that got us doing the company to begin with. We didn't love coconuts so much we would do this. It was the people. So it is gratifying, but there were some real hard stages, some points where felt like giving up, and pretty close to losing the business on a number of occasions. So I think the motivation to help those people took us through some of those pretty hard times. So.
Yeah. I would imagine that this is somewhat difficult to fund, to keep the lights on and keep things going, right? I mean, that's usually what happens. We've had a number. I think every entrepreneur on here, every startup guy, everybody who started a business has the story of, there was that point where we were running out of money, we were bootstrapping, we were trying to do what we had to do, and we didn't think we could carry on, and then something sort of clicked in their head to say, well, I have to keep going, right? Because it's quit. It's a lot more difficult to persevere.
Yeah. And with those who are interested in your show, Phil, I think there are lessons get learned the hard way that you want to help other people not do that. But, when I think back, just before we got on today, I was thinking about the really difficult lesson when you're raising capital for a small business and you're starting out. We did not do it the way I would do it if I did it a second time. We were trying to start the whole thing at the same time as we were raising the capital. And what happens is you burn that as you go, keeping the lights on. And when you come to get started, you've got to raise capital again.
Yeah.
And so I think if I were doing that over, just if anybody's interested, that was one of the biggest lessons learned is be patient, raise that capital, don't get started full speed until you have it all, and not try and raise it as you go, because you'll burn it as you go.
Yeah, I think that it's a lot more difficult to raise it all at once, right? Well, I'll tell you what, and I've done it a million different ways. I think that when you have something that isn't off the ground yet, you don't have your minimum viable product, you haven't brought anything to market, you haven't proved the concept, it's really difficult to raise money. It's really difficult. Like, you can spend a lifetime banging on 1,000 doors, 1,500 doors, to try and get money. I think it's probably a little bit easier not much easier. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think it's probably a little bit easier in the nonprofit world because that's a different pool of money, so to speak. They're not looking for the necessary return versus when you're going after it on a business. But I mentor entrepreneurs, and the reason I started this show, to be honest, was way back about 3 years ago, was because I mentor at the University of Maryland School of Entrepreneurship, and a lot of these young guys, they got this warped view of business, and from watching some of these YouTubers and guys that claim that they, built these billion-dollar businesses, and they think they're going to put together a 10-page pitch deck, walk in, pitch about, 4 or 5 investors, and walk out with a check for 10 million. And it just doesn't work that way. And what I preach to everybody is, and I've done it myself, is, because I've tried to do it beforehand, is you come up with your minimum viable product, prove the market, prove you have customers, find a customer to buy your product. And that gives you an easier way to go and raise capital. But try and do it. There's also a timing aspect, because when you're building a business that's not necessarily social enterprise, but is for profit all the time, then they want to see that return. And what you really want to do is control the company and control your destiny. So you don't want to go right out and get money, because the minute you do, you've lost control. And So I understand what you're saying, and believe me, raising money is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
It's very, very difficult, and it's time consuming. And like you said, it takes your focus off the business. You're trying to run the business and you're trying to raise capital.
Yeah.
And it's a quandary, and it's a quandary for a lot of guys. How to do it, when to do it, where to do it. But I found the revelation I had, and it took me 3 businesses to get there, was when we did the shaving business, we had a strategic partner, somebody who was the manufacturer of razors, and we made them a partner in the business, because then we had a vested interest. We gave them equity, and we got, in exchange for money and product. But it was straight equity. It wasn't like private equity where, it's, you're getting preferred shares plus a coupon plus, warrants for common shares and all that. By the end of the day, it was just a long-term loan. So anyway, but that's a whole, we've had that discussion on this show a million times about raising capital and how to do it and all that. So yeah. I would imagine that was very different. It's got to be very difficult, especially what you guys are doing, because you're actually building the infrastructure for manufacturing, which is no small feat.
Yeah, I think we found ourselves doing so many jobs at the same time. And if you're a small company, you have friends who are in larger companies saying, "Oh, well, get a guy who does this and get a gal who does that." And you're like, "We don't have the money to do that. We have to do that ourselves." I'll do that between 10 p.m. and midnight, and then I'll do the next thing you're talking about at 5 a.m. So you're right. You're trying to build a manufacturing company. You're trying to build the sales end of it. You're trying to do the development of the employees in the company. It just goes on and on. But in a way, that's the fun of it too.
Oh yeah,
it's not boring. You're doing a lot of different things, not just slotted into one job. So.
Yeah. And then you've got to train people as well on top of it, right? So I'm sure you're here. I'm sure that you've got somebody watching the facility over in the Philippines, right? Probably somebody that you trained, I would imagine.
That's right. We have, in fact, there are, the whole company are Filipinos. So we started with, 3 people, and now we got 100 plus, and fantastic leadership, fantastic leaders over there. So
that's amazing. That's an amazing story. 130 some odd people. That's fantastic. And then who's in charge of sales? Erik?
Yeah, I have a small team of 2 marketing gals, but really it's interesting that we're the ones being interviewed on this, because we're the only 2 white guys in this whole business. And yet
majority women leadership in the Philippines, majority women on the board, the president's a woman, the original plant manager is a woman. And so here we are, the 2 white guys, but it's all right. It's what we got.
Yeah. And then who's going out and doing sales? Who's you're hitting? I would imagine you're hitting retailers, supermarkets in this country and other countries, or?
Yeah, that's right. And for years, I was doing it myself with the marketing team. And it wasn't until last year that I hired a broker to help me do it. So right now I'm working with Old Colony Foods, and it's amazing how they've been able to open doors for me.
Oh yeah. 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 I was in early on, I was in the supermarket business. I had a business, and it got acquired by a supermarket chain, and I was involved for a couple of years, and it was amazing to me. I didn't really understand the broker network and how the brokers helped manufacturers, but the really good brokers were the ones that were in the building every day, and they knew everything that was going on, and they just always listened. You didn't think they were listening, but they listened, and then they'd leave the building, and they wind up calling somebody up and go, "There's an opportunity for such and such at, so can you get product down here?" Then they'd come in the next day and say, "I found a solution to your problem. I heard you talking yesterday about, blah, blah, blah." And, it was amazing. So, we help. A lot of the brands we work with are also, some are small and medium size, and they're trying to get into retail. And I always tell them the same thing. I say, you got to find a broker who's in the building. I don't care, if they're national brokers, they got to have people that are in the building every day, because those are the guys that are going to make a difference. you know.
Mm.
So yeah, it's cool. Yeah, I mean, I think you guys are doing a phenomenal job. I think it's really interesting story. And how long have we been doing this for? How long have you been doing this for?
12
years. Yeah. So we weren't selling product right away, but we've been in it for 12 years. So
I mean, building the facility took years. There, as Stephen said, there was no road; it was a dirt road, and so
mud road.
You couldn't get a cement truck in there to lay the foundation or the walls, and so
it's a big building. And Phil, we built that thing with cement that we hand carried across the river. We had a fire brigade of about 30 people standing,
right,
waist deep, handing bags of cement across to the other side where there was a pickup truck taking it. And it was really, really amazing. It was very fun, but yeah. And I can't believe we did that.
Yeah. So we launched our first product in 2017. So in some ways, it feels like it hasn't been quite 12 years.
Well, it's 7 years, right?
Yeah.
4 and 3. Yeah, it's 7 years, almost 8. That's quite the feat. That's quite the feat.
Yeah.
You got to be proud of yourself. We had a guy on the show, a guy named Joe Rothley. He, if you're a dog lover, Greenies, the dog treat. Mm-hmm. He founded that company back in the 90s. He was in his 50s. His wife told him one day that the dog had bad breath and he needed to solve the problem. He worked for the government in statistics or something, and he was in his 50s and he started experimenting with different things and he came up with a solution. And so his wife said, we should market this. And so he quit his job and took the leap in his 50s. And he said they didn't have a salary for 3 years, grew the business. And then, it took off tremendously and he wound up selling it to Mars for, whatever kind of money it was. But he's not driven by money. And he also took the money and he went down to someplace in South America, and he was down there for a vacation, and he realized that people that essentially had 2 pieces of cardboard and a piece of metal were living in houses. That was their house, and so he came back to the States, and he got a bunch of guys together. They went down there with his own money and he started buying up plots of land and he built houses for people. And then he would essentially give them to them. Right. And then what happened was the folks that were down there started helping build the houses. And one guy that was down there, I guess, I forget how the product started, but it had something to do with drill bits and, they kept breaking. And this guy came who lived down there, and he just an uneducated guy. He was just there. He figured out a better way to do it, and Joe wound up taking that process, and they created a brand which he sells in Lowe's and called Spider, which he sells in Lowe's and Home Depot, and these Spider tools. And they're just different on how you make. Oh, I remember now. It's got to do with how you're making the big holes to run wires through and getting the piece of wood out after after it goes through the drill bit. And this guy figured out a way to do it. So anyway, they created this brand called Spider Tools, and it essentially funds the building of these houses in, I forget the countries, and that's sort of what he does. He doesn't care. It's a total social enterprise, but he was on the show twice. He's got some unbelievable stories. I mean, he funded this whole thing in his native, he lives in St. Louis, and of dogs that go with this woman into cancer wards and children's cancer wards and all these hospitals to make the kids feel better and all this stuff. And so, there's never going to be any revenue coming out of that. It's just all going out, but he doesn't care. He's just and he's 80 years old now and he's still going, still creating things in his head. I mean, he's a lovely man. So,
I think a lot of times when we go to these impoverished areas, we see all the need that's there, all the things that they lack, the things that the gaps that they have. And I think the longer you work with people that are in those situations, the longer you realize they actually have a lot to offer.
Oh yeah.
They have needs. They actually have assets. I think of Ivy, who she's now our plant manager. When she lived near our plant, and she came from a family of coconut farmers.
Yeah.
And they were living in a really tough situation, hard to put food on the table. They would often be skipping meals because they didn't have enough money, because they were selling their coconuts to the coconut industry that was taking advantage of them, offering predatory loans of over 200% interest rates. But we helped them get out of that. They started selling their coconuts to Dignity. They got out of those debts and started getting a better price. They started doing some of the community development work that we were doing. And eventually Ivy, she graduated high school, and she had enough money. She was able to go to college, and she got a degree in food technology.
Wow.
She came back. She had opportunities to go other places and work with Pepsi and other companies. And she said, no, I want to go back to my hometown, and I want to help the people. So she's our production manager, and she's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. We stick to it sort of. I live in Maryland, so we have problems in this state, in the city of Baltimore, and so my wife and I are more focused on that right now, because people don't have housing, they don't have food, they don't have education. It's, and it's right here in our backyard. And I could tell you stories about what I did when we had a shaving business, but it would take too much time up. But we did something similar to what you guys are doing here in Baltimore, and certainly not on the scale you're doing. I mean, what you're doing is quite an undertaking, and I applaud you for it. It's amazing. But
well, I think with the audience you have of entrepreneurs, we did this really, Phil, to try and create a proof of concept that you could intentionally build a business that was there to help the people.
Yeah.
And I think everybody listening could come up with ideas. Baltimore, St. Louis, Colombia, the Philippines, wherever, to use business as an engine to help bring change.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give everything away, all your money, to do that. You can build the thing you wanted to build. You just have to be intentional about how you treat your employees and what you do with the stream of income. And it's pretty exciting venture. And never a dull moment. We're in the middle of another crisis now. We just got hit by a typhoon and knocked out of several of the roads, and we got to figure out how to get our product to market. And it's fun. Tell me that tomorrow, that it's really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last week you would have not said this is fun.
Yeah. No. I mean, I think that's a great closing, because we've only got about a minute and a half left. But it's a great closing what you just said, and you're really setting up a model for how to build social enterprise that's creating products, creating jobs, and what you do with that money and how you help people with it. I think it's great. I'd love to talk to you more about it, because I think that my head started thinking about things and setting up a model for that. But I'd love to talk to you guys more about it at another time. I think it's wonderful. So,
Great.
I appreciate you guys coming on. I just appreciate you taking the time. I know it's difficult, to carve out an hour when you're as busy as you guys are, but I appreciate you doing it and telling the story. And I hope the listeners enjoyed it. And I'm sure that we'll see. And I appreciate you taking the time and telling that story. I think it's fantastic.
Great.
Thanks for having us
Thank
on.
you. Yeah.
We love telling the story.
Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. All right. Well, guys, we're running towards the end of it. We'll see you next week. We're coming up on the holidays, so we're going to have to do some pre-records and some reruns, but because my show seems to show up on the Tuesdays, which are on all the holidays, New Year's Eve, Christmas Eve. So it's going to be a little difficult this year. But again, I appreciate you appreciate you coming on, and I hope everybody enjoyed this, and look for it. It'll be up on It'll be up on several different channels tomorrow. It ran tonight on a bunch of channels, but I'll send you guys a copy of the link, and you'll see some promos out in the next week and two, going for the next week or two. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Good night.